Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. The president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is scheduled to hold a meeting with US President Barack Obama. One of the key issues on the agenda will be Israel's settlement construction in the West Bank. Under the so-called Roadmap for Peace, Israel had pledged to stop settlement expansion, but construction has continued and new outposts have been established. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he'll stop new construction but wants to leave room for what he calls natural growth of existing settlements. The Obama administration wants all construction stopped. On today's show, we look at the prospects for peace and the future of settlements. Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and then take part. We, of course, also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining our conversation here in Washington, D.C. is Dr. Shibley Telhami, the Anwar Sadat Professor of Peace and Development at the University of Maryland. Dr. Telhami wrote the national bestseller, The Stakes: America in the Middle East, the Consequences of Power and the Choice for Peace. And later in the program, we will be joined by Dr. Mark Levine of the University of California at Irvine. Well, let's start off with you, Dr. Telhami. This is a new president. Now we've got another round of talks taking place. The US president has already met with Mr. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. Now it's Mr. Abbas's turn. Can we realistically expect anything significant to come out of this?
Well, soon enough, there will have to be a time when the administration will announce a peace plan, no question, especially since the president has already said this is a priority issue for the United States of America, not only as a goodwill toward the Israelis and the Palestinians, but as a national security, a national interest of the United States of America. So he's going to have to show something. But the time is not now. He is going through consultations. He's said from the outset that he doesn't plan to dictate. He wants to listen. And he's in listening mode. And he's talked to the King of Jordan, a lot of Middle Eastern leaders, including Egyptian leaders, as well as the Prime Minister of Israel. He's meeting with the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, obviously now, and clearly this is a stage of consultation. He will be giving an important speech in Cairo next week. This is not going to be a speech that is necessarily focused on the Arab-Israeli issue, but the pressure is going to mount every single day on him to go beyond the consultation and to announce a peace plan. Expectations are really high in the region.
You know, one of the issues that's been dominating this debate so far, even before Mr. Abbas came into town, was the issue of settlements. The Americans have made a very forceful statement, perhaps their most forceful statement yet on settlements, with the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton saying that there must be no expansion of settlements, whether they be natural outgrowth or outposts, whatever, no expansion whatsoever. And the next day, the Israelis said, sorry, expansion is going to continue. Well, so already there's a serious problem.
No question. I think, look, I mean, from the American point of view, settlements have always been a problem. From day one, there's never been an administration that didn't see settlements as a problem. It's a question of how forceful they were in addressing the settlement issue. Beginning with the Carter administration, when the Carter administration actually determined that they were illegal under international law. But since then, the rhetoric has been different. There are obstacles to peace or problem, but every administration has raised it. This administration has raised it more forcefully and very early. That's a bit unusual. I think the president clearly has specific requests, demands that he's making to both sides, the Arab side, the Israeli side. On the one thing that's clear is that he's committed to a two-state solution. This is an administration that is ultimately going to be judged by the end of this administration. It's going to be judged by the extent to which it brings the Middle East closer to a two-state solution or away from a two-state solution. It's really kind of already become an issue of credibility. And one central issue early on is emerging as the settlement issue, because it's obvious that the administration has taken a very clear position, with the Secretary of State yesterday announcing very clearly that a freeze means a freeze also on so-called natural growth. And the Israeli government is having a problem with that, in part because many of the coalition partners in the Israeli government are profoundly opposed to any freeze. So it really poses a threat to the makeup of the Israeli government itself.
But that also indicates some kind of confidence on the part of the Americans. What are the cards that President Obama holds right now?
Well, look, this is early in the administration, and that's always very important, because if you do it too late, you don't have much time. The time horizon starts closing on you, and then you get into an election mode. When you do it early enough, you have a lot more time to reap the benefits of a position that you take early. So he does have time on his side in terms of implementing a policy very early on. As you said, he's been here for only a few weeks, so it's really, one shouldn't expect a lot. They've actually done a lot more than people may have expected early on. And frankly, I was surprised, and I was one of the people who supported this administration, advised it from the beginning. But I was surprised by the rapidity of putting this issue on the forefront of the president's agenda, because that's frankly a personal decision. It's not an advisor's decision. This is something that a president himself says, this is an important issue. I believe this is an important issue. That's actually what's driving all of this, is the president's belief that this is a central issue for the United States of America to deal with, and he has time. Now, obviously, at some point, if this is a credibility issue for the administration, the Israelis are of a different opinion on this, there's going to be some difficulty in bringing the two together. And I think for now, the administration's position is clear. They think that through dialogue and continued conversation with the Israelis, they can bring them along, but time will tell.
I want to go to an email that we received from Pakistan. This is from Riz Khan that we received, and he says the U.S. needs to take more than just a firm stand on the issue. U.S. governments have forced Pakistan to do things they want while completely shutting their eyes and ears to the consequences. Why can't the U.S. do the same with Israel?
Well, there's one thing to be firm, and I think the U.S., this administration has been actually very firm, because they're not backtracking on positions, and they're moving forward, and they're pushing, as I said, more rapidly. Time will tell. We don't know yet. Obviously, you know, the evidence is still out. But I have also to say at the same time that the U.S. is a powerful country, for sure, and it has a lot of influence with countries, including with Israel and with other Arab countries. But it doesn't dictate on core issues. It can influence, it can move things slowly, but the fact that even a superpower cannot dictate in a way that people expect, but a determined American foreign policy certainly can get results. And I think if you heard President Obama's original conversation with the Arab public on Al Arabiya, the first week of his presidency, he said, I know in the end you're not going to judge me by my words, but about my actions. And I think that's going to be the issue for this administration, because you can have many speeches that are going to be effective. The discourse is important. The kind of respectful discourse is important that they're engaged in. But in the end, people are going to look for action.
Okay, let's go to our viewers. We've got a call from Siad in Somalia. Siad, go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. My question is that America is forcing Netanyahu to stop the settlement. If somehow Netanyahu refuses to do so, what is the expected reaction from the U.S. administration? Okay,
let me put that question to Dr. Telhami.
Well, I mean, it's hard to know what options the administration is considering precisely, but I think my read of the president's instinct and my read of the administration instinct is that they work with countries to move the process in a cooperative fashion to the extent possible, and that their first option is always to find a way to move this forward. They've been engaged with the Israelis very intensely on this. Special Envoy Senator Mitchell was in London having conversation with the Israelis on this. Next week, the Israeli Defense Minister is coming to town, and you can bet there will be conversations on it. So for now, I think it's really a question of consultation, working on it. But in the end, if things don't change, there's no question that it becomes an issue of credibility for both sides, and there will be a test of wills, and how that shapes up, obviously will determine how the rest of the world is going to look at the conduct of American foreign policy.
Dr. Telhami, we just have a few seconds left, and it might not be enough to address this issue, but how does the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, get Hamas on board?
Well, you know, look, I have to be very honest. I wrote co-authored a report for the Council on Foreign Relations and Brookings as a recommendation to the new administration, in which I argued in that article that it's hard to envision how you can have movement on the Palestinian-Israeli front unless you have a unified Palestinian position. I just can't see it. I mean, if a way has to be found to bring a unified Palestinian position. I think this is something that both sides have to work very hard on. Obviously, it has to be in harmony with the international resolutions. This administration clearly is focused on international resolutions. That's why the U.S. is trying to clean its own house first on matters related to international law. And I think that President Mahmoud Abbas, Hamas leaders, other people who are trying to bring about reconciliations, you're going to have to work hard to find a formula, because if you don't find a formula that's acceptable to the international community and unified Palestinian position, it's going to be very hard to envision how you can have movement on the Israeli-Palestinian front.
Okay, so that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We are going to take a short break right now, more of our discussion in a moment. And as we pause, let me remind you that you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. We're also taking a poll there and asking, what is the best way for the US to help bring an end to Israeli settlement expansion? Using diplomacy, cutting aid, or cooperating with Israel on Iran policy? Tell us what you think. We'll have the results after the break. We'll be right back.